I stood backstage in the auditorium, my white choir dress crisp and perfect, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles went pale. The velvet curtain smelled like dust and years of performances, and through the gap I could see the rows filling up with families, cameras ready, flowers clutched in laps. The other girls buzzed around me, adjusting each other's hair ribbons, their mothers fussing over collar pins in the front row. I kept my eyes on the third row, centre left. 4 empty seats. I'd reserved them myself 2 months ago, paid the fee with my babysitting money, sent the reminder email last week, left a note on the kitchen counter this morning with the time circled twice. "Helena, you're pale," Mrs. Chen, our choir director, touched my shoulder. "Nervous?" "No." I wasn't nervous about singing. I'd practiced the solo until my throat went raw. I could hit every note in my sleep. "Your family coming?" I nodded, though the seats stayed empty. "They're probably running late." But I knew. Somewhere across town, my father was at Maya's soccer game. My mother was filming from the sidelines, her phone full of action shots and proud commentary. Maya was their star, their athlete, the daughter who brought home trophies instead of sheet music, the daughter whose events mattered. The house lights dimmed. The empty seat stared back at me like missing teeth in a smile. Mrs. Chen gave the signal. We filed onto the risers. I took my place in the centre of the second row, right where the spotlight would catch me for my solo in the 4th song. My hands trembled, so I pressed them flat against my thighs. I could see other girls' parents already recording, their phones glowing in the darkness. The accompanist played the opening notes. We sang. The harmony wrapped around me like it always did, familiar and safe. I loved this feeling, being part of something bigger, my voice blending and rising with others. For 3 songs, I forgot about the empty seats. Then came Panis Angelicus, my solo. The other voices dropped away. The spotlight found me. I opened my mouth and sang the Latin verses I'd worked on for months, the ones that required perfect breath control and absolute clarity. My voice filled the auditorium, echoing off the high ceiling. I could feel the notes resonating in my chest, pure and controlled. In the audience, strangers' phones lifted to record a girl they didn't know. But the 4 seats in the third row remained empty, dark spaces where my family should have been. I finished the solo. The choir rejoined me for the final verses. Applause erupted, but I was already scanning those seats one more time, some desperate part of me still hoping they'd rushed in late, that they were standing in the back. Nothing. After the performance, families flooded the stage. Girls disappeared into hugs and bouquets. My choir robe suddenly felt too warm, too tight around my throat. "Helena!" Mrs. Chen appeared with her own daughter. "That solo was magnificent. You've been practicing." "Thank you." "Where's your family?" "They had something else." The words came out flat, rehearsed. I'd been preparing this excuse since the seat stayed empty. They'll watch the video later. But there was no video. They hadn't asked anyone to record it. When I got home 3 hours later, Maya's soccer trophy sat on the dining table, centred like a shrine. My parents were still at the celebration dinner I hadn't been invited to. The note I'd left that morning was exactly where I'd placed it, untouched, unread. I went upstairs and hung my choir dress in the back of my closet. In the mirror, I could still see the stage makeup I'd carefully applied, the hairpins Mrs. Chen had arranged. I looked like someone who'd performed for an audience. I felt like I'd sung to an empty room. I didn't cry. There was something too final about crying, like admitting I'd expected different. They came home after 10, voices loud with leftover celebration. I heard Maya laughing about a goal she'd scored, my mother's enthusiastic retelling already polishing it into legend. I stayed in my room with the lights off, lying on top of my covers in my street clothes. My father knocked once. "Helena, you asleep?" I didn't answer. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said through the door. Maya's game went into overtime. You understand? I understood perfectly. The next 3 years followed the same pattern. Piano recitals they missed for Maya's track meets. Art shows they skipped for Maya's award ceremonies. My 16th birthday dinner cut short because Maya had a championship game. I stopped expecting them to show up. I stopped mentioning my events. I learnt to drive myself places, to sit in audiences surrounded by other people's families, to applaud my own accomplishments in the privacy of my room. I got quieter. Not from sadness, I'd moved past sadness somewhere around my sophomore year. I got quiet because I realised my voice, the thing I'd cultivated and trained and perfected, only mattered in the moments I gave it away to people who actually wanted to hear it. I stopped auditioning for solos. I stood in the back row of the choir. I let other girls have the spotlight I'd once fought for. Mrs. Chen asked what happened, concern creasing her face. I told her I wanted to focus on my grades. She didn't push. At home, I became a ghost. I ate breakfast before everyone woke up. I stayed after school for anything that kept me away until dinner, then claimed homework and closed my bedroom door. I spoke only when directly addressed. I learned to exist in parallel to my family, rather than as part of it. Maya noticed first. "You're being weird," she said one evening, standing in my doorway. She'd grown taller, more confident, filled with the easy assurance of someone who'd never questioned whether she mattered. "I'm studying." "You're always studying, or practicing, or gone." "I have things to do." "Mom says you're being, difficult." I looked up from my calculus textbook. "Did she? When did she say that?" Maya shifted. "At dinner last night." "I wasn't at dinner last night." "Oh," she frowned. "Right." "Anything else?" She left without answering. I graduated valedictorian. My parents came to the ceremony because it would have looked wrong not to. They sat in the audience and smiled when I gave my speech. Afterwards, my mother hugged me and said she was proud. My father took pictures. Maya looked bored. We went to dinner at the restaurant of their choosing. They asked about college. I told them I'd gotten a full scholarship to a music conservatory 6 states away. They looked surprised, then pleased, not because I was pursuing music, but because the scholarship meant they wouldn't have to pay. "You never mentioned applying there," my mother said. "I applied to a lot of places." "When do you leave?" "August 15th. That gave them 3 months. They spent it planning Maya's freshman year at the local university, where she'd gotten a partial soccer scholarship. They bought her dorm supplies. They mapped out parents' weekend visits. They talked constantly about how hard it would be to have her living away from home. I packed my own boxes. I said goodbye to Mrs. Chen, who cried and made me promise to send recordings. I closed the door to my childhood bedroom and felt nothing. The last night before I left, I sat at the dinner table while they toasted Maya's future. My father raised his glass. "To both our girls, starting new chapters." Both. The word rang false, acknowledgement without meaning. I raised my water glass and drank. The next morning, my mother drove me to the airport. The car ride was quiet. At the drop-off curb, she hugged me briefly. "Call us when you land." "I will." "We're proud of you, Helena." I wanted to ask when they'd started being proud, what moment had earned it, whether pride counted when it came 6 years late. Instead, I said, "Thank you." I watched her drive away, and something in my chest loosened. Relief, freedom, the beginning of a life where my voice would matter because I chose who heard it. At the conservatory, I thrived. I found professors who knew my name, who listened when I sang, who pushed me not because I was competing with someone else, but because they could hear what I was capable of. I made friends who understood that music wasn't a hobby or a phase, but a language, a necessity. I auditioned for solos again. I won them. I stood in spotlight after spotlight and sang to audiences who'd chosen to be there, who wanted to hear me. My voice grew stronger, richer, more controlled. I learned techniques I'd never encountered in high school. I discovered I could make people cry with the right phrasing, the right breath. My parents called every few weeks. Surface conversations. They asked about classes and grades, never about performances. They talked about Maya's soccer season, her new boyfriend, her sorority. I listened and responded appropriately, and hung up feeling nothing. Christmas break my freshman year, I flew home. The house looked the same. My bedroom had been left untouched, but felt like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. Maya was tan from fall season, full of stories about game-winning goals and parties. My parents asked polite questions about my semester, then returned to discussing Maya's plans. I sat at the dinner table and ate quietly. No one asked about my voice. No one mentioned music. When dessert came, my father said, "Maya made the all-conference team." "Congratulations," I said. Maya beamed. "Coach says if I keep improving, I might make captain next year." "That's wonderful." My mother turned to me. "And you, Helena, how are your classes?" "Good. I made the chamber choir." "That's nice." She immediately looked back at Maya. "Tell them about the tournament." I went back to school after 5 days instead of the planned 2 weeks. I said I had rehearsals. They didn't question it. Spring semester, I met an old high school classmate at a coffee shop near campus. Jessica, who'd sung in choir with me, who'd stood beside me in that white dress the night my family didn't come. "Helena!" She hugged me like we'd been close. We hadn't been particularly, but distance makes acquaintances into friends. "I didn't know you went here." "Full scholarship for vocal performance." "No way! I remember your solo in Panis Angelicus. You were incredible." The memory arrived sharp and intact. The empty seats, the strangers' phones, the silence when I got home. "That was a long time ago," I said. "Are you performing? Can I come see you?" I hesitated. Then something shifted. "Actually, yes. I have a recital in 2 weeks. It's my junior solo showcase." "I'm there. Text me the details." I did, and she came. She brought friends from her dorm. They sat in the 3rd row, centre, and when I stepped onto the stage in a deep blue dress, their phones were already raised, their attention already mine. I sang 5 songs, arias I'd been preparing for months. My voice had matured, deepened, found new colours and ranges. I could feel the difference between the girl I'd been at 17 and the woman I was becoming. Every note was intentional, every breath was controlled. I wasn't singing for approval or attention or love. I was singing because this was what I'd built, what I'd chosen, what I'd earned. The applause was thunderous. Jessica and her friends stood, strangers stood, my professor, sitting in the back, nodded with satisfaction. After, Jessica hugged me again. "That was unbelievable. You need to send that recording to everyone from home." "Maybe. Your family must be so proud," I smiled. "They don't really understand music." "But they come to your performances, right?" The question hung there, innocent and devastating. I could have lied. Instead, I said, "No, they never have." Jessica's face fell. "Never?" "Not since high school, and not then either." "Helena, it's fine." And I meant it. The sharpness had worn away somewhere between that first empty auditorium and this full one. "I don't need them to," but Jessica's face stayed troubled. "That's not fine. You're incredible. They should be here." "They have other priorities." "That's not..." She stopped. "I'm sorry," I shrugged. "I'm not." And I wasn't. That was the truth I'd found in 3 years away from home. Their absence had hurt once, had carved out space inside me that echoed with all the applause they'd never given. But I'd filled that space with other things, with professors who remembered my name, friends who showed up, audiences who chose to listen. I'd filled it with my own voice, singing not for validation, but for the pure act of creation. I didn't need them anymore. Summer arrived. I didn't go home. I got an internship at a summer opera program in Colorado, where I spent 3 months singing in the mountains, learning from visiting artists, falling asleep each night with my throat pleasantly raw. My parents called once. I was in rehearsal and didn't answer. They didn't call back. Senior year, everything changed. I was walking across campus in October when my phone rang. My father's number. We hadn't spoken in 4 months. Helena. His voice sounded strained. We need to talk. I'm on my way to class. It's important. It's about Maya. My chest tightened. What happened? She tore her ACL. Surgery went well, but the recovery time means she's out for the season, possibly out for good. I stopped walking. Students flowed around me. I'm sorry, that's terrible. She's devastated. The doctor says she can recover, but her scholarship might be in jeopardy. She's talking about quitting school. Is she in pain? Physically, she's managing, but emotionally... He trailed off. She's lost. Soccer was everything to her. I don't think we realised how much. I stood there holding the phone, searching for the response I was supposed to give. Sympathy came easier than I expected. Maya had built her entire identity on being an athlete. Without that, who was she? I knew that feeling intimately. I'm sorry, I said again. Tell her I hope she recovers quickly. Could you call her? I think she needs to hear from you. Why would she want to hear from me? You're her sister. The word felt hollow. We'd been sisters in biology only, strangers sharing a house. But I said, I'll text her. Thank you. He paused. How are you? How's school? Fine. Good. That's good. Another pause. Your mother wants to plan a visit. Maybe Thanksgiving? I'm performing in the fall showcase on Thanksgiving weekend. Oh. He sounded genuinely surprised. Well, maybe Christmas then. Sure. I hung up and stared at my phone. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the family photo album on my cloud storage. Pictures of Maya in her soccer uniform, year after year, my parents beaming beside her. Pictures of Maya's trophies lined up on shelves. Pictures of family dinners, vacations, birthday parties, all centered around her schedule, her achievements, her life. I appeared in maybe 1 out of every 10 photos. Background noise, the sister who was also there. I put my phone away and went to class. That night, I texted Maya. Dad told me about your knee. I'm really sorry. That's devastating. She responded an hour later. Thanks. It sucks. Are you staying in school? I don't know. What's the point? I stared at that message for a long time. What's the point? The question of someone who'd never had to find meaning beyond external validation. There are other things besides soccer, I typed. Not for me. I didn't respond. What could I say? That she'd have to learn to exist without constant applause, that she'd have to build an identity from internal worth rather than visible achievement. That her whole life she'd been given attention I'd had to create for myself, and now she'd learn what it felt like when that attention disappeared. It felt cruel to say it. It felt true not to. 3 weeks later, my mother called. We'd like to come visit. We haven't seen your campus. When? We were thinking this weekend. We could drive up Friday, spend Saturday with you, drive back Sunday. This weekend was my chamber choir concert. We were performing a challenging program, Renaissance motets and contemporary compositions. I had 2 solos. I have a performance Saturday night, I said. Oh. A pause. Could we come to that? The question stunned me into silence. In 4 years of college, they'd never asked to attend a performance. They'd never asked about my music at all, beyond polite surface inquiries. You want to come to my concert? Of course, we'd love to see you perform. Love to. as if they'd been asking all along, as if this was natural, expected, normal. Why now? The question came out sharper than I intended. What do you mean? You've never wanted to come before. You've never asked. Helena, that's not fair. You never invited us. The words hit like a slap. I never invited them, as if the responsibility had been mine, as if I hadn't spent my childhood leaving notes, sending reminders, reserving seats they never filled. I invited you to every performance, I said quietly. For years. Well, we couldn't make them. You understand how busy we were with Maya's schedule. There it was. The truth laid bare, casual and unapologetic. They'd been too busy with Maya to care about me. Right, I said. Well, this concert is important. I've worked very hard on it. Then we'll be there. What time? 7:30. I'll put your names on the guest list. Perfect. We're looking forward to it. I hung up feeling strange. Not excited, not hopeful. Those feelings had died years ago. But something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or the faint satisfaction of knowing they'd finally see what they'd been missing. Friday came. They texted that they'd arrived at their hotel. Saturday afternoon, we met for lunch at a cafe near campus. They looked older. My father's hair had more grey. My mother had new glasses. Maya wasn't with them. She didn't want to come, I asked. She's still processing everything, my mother said. The injury hit her hard. I'm sure. She might take a gap year, focus on recovery. I nodded and bit into my sandwich. So tell us about tonight, my father said. What are you singing? We're doing a Renaissance program, mostly sacred motets, then some 20th century pieces for contrast. In English? Some Latin, some English, one in German. You learned German? I learned 4 languages for my major, German, Italian, French, and Latin. They looked impressed in the distant way of people admiring a stranger's accomplishments. That's wonderful, Helena. Thank you. Lunch continued with polite conversation. They asked about my plans after graduation. I told them I'd been accepted to a prestigious graduate program in vocal performance with full funding. They nodded, said congratulations, asked if I'd considered something more practical. Like what? Teaching, maybe? Something stable? Performance is what I'm trained for. It's what I want. Of course, my mother smiled. We just worry. You don't need to. The afternoon stretched empty before the concert. They went back to their hotel. I went to the concert hall for final rehearsals. My professor pulled me aside. Your parents are coming tonight? Yes. First time? First time. She studied my face. How do you feel about that? I don't know yet. Fair enough. She squeezed my shoulder. Sing for yourself, not for them. I always do. Evening arrived. I changed into my concert black. A simple dress, elegant and professional. I pinned my hair back, applied minimal makeup. In the mirror, I looked like what I was, a serious musician, about to give a serious performance. I didn't look nervous because I wasn't. I'd sung these pieces 100 times. I knew every entrance, every breath, every dynamic shift. This was what I did. This was who I'd become. The concert hall filled. I stood backstage with my chamber choir, 20 voices I'd trained with for 4 years. We knew each other's sounds intimately. We could breathe together, shift together, create something unified and precise. Through the curtain, I could see the audience settling. My professor had reserved seats for my parents in the 5th row, centre. They sat there looking around, taking in the hall's acoustics, the professional lighting, the program notes printed on heavy paper. They looked impressed. They looked uncomfortable. They looked like people who'd wandered into a world they didn't understand. The lights dimmed. We walked on stage. I took my place in the 2nd row. visible but not prominent. My first solo wouldn't come until the fourth piece. We sang. The way Renaissance motets unfolded with mathematical precision, each voice weaving through the others. The acoustics were perfect. We'd rehearsed in this space until we knew exactly how to shape each phrase, how to balance dynamics, how to let the music breathe. I could feel the audience listening, really listening, with the focused attention music like this demanded. No phones out, no whispered conversations, just the music and the space it filled. My first solo arrived, a Monteverdi piece, Lamento della Ninfa, where the soprano voice carries a line of grief over a repeating bass. I stepped forward. The lights caught me. I sang the opening phrase, my voice floating high and clear over the sustained harmonies below. This was not the girl who'd sung Panis Angelicus at 17. That girl had been talented but uncertain, seeking approval through perfect technique. I was different now. I understood that technique served emotion, that precision created space for vulnerability, that control allowed for greater freedom. I sang grief without being overwhelmed by it. I shaped each phrase with intention. When I finished, the silence held for a perfect moment before the choir rejoined me. I stepped back into formation. From where I stood, I couldn't see my parents' faces. I didn't try to look. We sang the rest of the programme. My second solo came in a contemporary piece, all angular intervals and unexpected harmonies. I navigated it with confidence, my voice clear and unwavering through the challenging passages. The concert ended. Applause filled the hall, genuine and sustained. We bowed together, the unity of a group that had worked as one. Backstage, my professor hugged me. Exceptional. You've grown so much. Thank you. Your parents must be proud. We'll see. I changed and went to meet them in the lobby. They stood near the door, looking slightly lost among the music students and faculty who crowded the space. I walked over. What did you think? You were wonderful, my mother said, hugging me briefly. Really wonderful. That was quite impressive, my father added. Very professional. Thank you. We had no idea you were this advanced, my mother continued. The programme said you're a graduate student next year. Yes, full scholarship again. That's excellent. We stood there in awkward silence. Around us, other students celebrated with their families, taking photos, making dinner plans. My parents looked ready to leave. Well, my father said, we should probably head back. Long drive tomorrow. Of course. Thank you for putting us on the list, my mother said. It was lovely. Lovely. The word sat wrong, like describing a sunset as adequate. I'm glad you could make it, I said. We walked to the parking lot together. At their car, they hugged me again, promised to call, told me to let them know when graduation was. Then they drove away, taillights disappearing into the night. I stood there feeling nothing, not disappointment. I'd stopped expecting more years ago. Not anger, that had burned out somewhere between high school and now. Just a clear, calm understanding that they'd come, they'd watched, and they still didn't really see me. They'd seen a performance, technical skill, professional presentation, but they hadn't seen the years of work, the dedication, the countless hours I'd spent building this. They hadn't understood that what they'd witnessed tonight was the result of everything they'd ignored, everything I'd done alone, and they never would. I walked back to my apartment. My roommate, also a voice major, was still at the reception. I sat on my bed in the quiet and felt the truth settle into place, like a final note resolving. They'd missed it, all of it, and I'd built something beautiful anyway. The rest of senior year passed in a blur of performances, auditions, final recitals. I sang in masterclasses with visiting artists. I competed in regional competitions and placed consistently. My professor nominated me for awards. I won some. My parents called occasionally. Surface conversations. They never mentioned the concert. I never brought it up. Maya took a gap year. She went to physical therapy. She posted on social media about her recovery journey, about finding herself beyond soccer. People commented with support. She seemed to be managing. I felt no satisfaction in her struggle. It wasn't what I'd wanted. I'd never wanted her to fail. I just wanted to matter equally, and she'd gotten all the attention because success is louder than quiet dedication. Spring arrived. Graduation approached. My parents said they'd come to the ceremony. I put their names on the guest list without expectation. 2 weeks before graduation, I got a call from a small opera company in Boston. They'd seen my audition tape. They wanted to offer me an apprentice artist position for the following season, paid with full benefits and the chance to perform supporting roles in their productions. I accepted immediately. When I told my parents, they sounded pleased but distant. "Boston is far," my mother said. 6 hours. Still, it's not like we'll be able to visit often. They hadn't visited at all except for one concert. "I'm sure we'll manage," I said. Graduation came. They attended. They took pictures. They met my professors, who told them I'd been an exceptional student. They nodded and smiled and looked proud in the automatic way of parents going through expected motions. That night we had dinner at an Italian restaurant. Maya had come this time, walking with a slight limp, but mostly recovered. She talked about going back to school in the fall, maybe to trying out for the team again, taking it slow. "And if soccer doesn't work out?" my father asked. "I don't know. Maybe I'll find something else." He patted her hand. "You will. You're talented at everything you try." I sipped my water and said nothing. "And you, Helena," my mother said, turning to me with visible effort. "This opera position, that's what you want?" "Yes. It seems risky. The arts are so unstable. I have a contract, benefits, it's more stable than you think. But long term? Can you really make a living?" "I plan to." She looked doubtful but didn't push. The conversation moved on. Plans for Maya's return to campus. Discussion of her new physical therapy routine. Whether she'd need a knee brace. I finished my meal quietly. This was it. The last family dinner before I left for a life they'd never really been part of. And they were spending it talking about Maya's knee. It didn't hurt anymore. It was just true. After dessert, my father handed me an envelope. Graduation gift. Inside was a check. Generous, more than I'd expected. "Thank you. We're proud of you, Helena. We know we haven't always been the best at showing it, but we are." I looked at him, really looked. He meant it. He genuinely believed he'd been supportive. In his mind, attending this one graduation erased years of empty chairs, missed performances, forgotten moments. "I know," I said, because arguing would change nothing. "Thank you." We said goodbye in the hotel parking lot. They were driving home that night. I hugged each of them briefly. Maya hugged me longer. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For taking up all the space. I didn't realize I was doing it." I pulled back to look at her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, honest. "It wasn't your fault. Still, you were just living your life. They made the choices." She nodded. "Will you visit?" "Maybe." "I'd like that." "Okay." I watched them drive away. Then I went back to my apartment and started packing for Boston. The opera apprenticeship was everything I'd hoped. Hard work, long hours, constant learning. I sang in choruses, covered principal roles, took every coaching and masterclass offered. I lived in a small apartment with 2 other apprentices. We stayed up late analysing scores, practicing languages, debating interpretations. I was happy, not the desperate, proving myself happiness of my teenage years. Just steady, earned contentment. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I was in rehearsals for a December production, where I'd been cast in a small speaking role. My first. I sent a text saying I couldn't make it. They sent back a disappointed emoji and a promise to catch up soon. Christmas, I flew home for 3 days. The house felt smaller. Maya was back at school. It was just me and my parents rattling around in rooms that had never quite felt like mine. "How's Boston?" my mother asked. "Good, really good. Are you performing?" "I'm in the chorus for most productions. I have a small role in the spring opera." "That's nice. Nice. Everything was always nice. Never remarkable, never significant, just nice." "How's Maya?" I asked. "She made the team again. She's starting slow, but the coach is optimistic." "That's great." We spent Christmas Day opening gifts, practical things, thoughtful in a generic way, and eating a meal my mother had carefully planned. They asked superficial questions about my life. I gave superficial answers. We maintained the appearance of closeness without its substance. On my last evening, my father called me into his study. "I want to talk to you about something." I sat down, waiting. "Your mother and I have been thinking. We know we weren't as present as we should have been when you were growing up." I said nothing. "We were focused on Maya because she seemed to need us more. She was always more outgoing, more demanding of attention. You were so independent. We thought you were fine on your own." "I was," I said, "because I had been. I'd had to be. But we should have tried harder. We should have come to your performances. We should have asked more about your music." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." He looked surprised by my directness. "We're sorry." Okay. Okay? "I accept your apology. Thank you for saying it." Just like that, I met his eyes. "What else do you want me to say? That it's fine? It wasn't? That I forgive you? Maybe someday, but right now I just want to acknowledge what happened and move forward." "You seem angry." "I'm not angry. I'm honest. There's a difference." He sat back in his chair, looking older and more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. "We do love you, Helena." "I know you do, in your way." "What does that mean?" "It means you love the idea of me, the successful daughter who got scholarships and never caused problems. But you don't really know me. You've never tried to know me. That's not fair." "Maybe not, but it's true." He couldn't argue. We both knew it. I left the next morning. They hugged me at the door, faces troubled. I felt lighter on the drive to the airport, like I'd finally said something that needed saying. Back in Boston, I threw myself into work. The spring production opened. I sang my small role with precision and confidence. Critics mentioned me favourably in reviews. The artistic director pulled me aside after closing night. "We'd like to offer you a second-year contract. Bigger roles, more responsibilities." "Yes," I said immediately. "You don't want time to think about it?" "No, this is exactly what I want." He smiled. "Good. You've earned it." That summer, I stayed in Boston and took workshops, studied with private teachers, auditioned for full productions. I built a life entirely separate from the family I'd grown up in. I made friends who became chosen family. I dated briefly, casually, nothing serious. I focused on my voice, my craft, my growth. I called my parents monthly, obligatory check-ins that lasted 15 minutes. They called me for birthdays and holidays. We maintained contact without connection. Maya and I texted occasionally. She sent updates about soccer, school, her boyfriend. I sent updates about performances. Our relationship was cordial, distant, the relationship of people who'd never quite been sisters. Years passed. I aged out of the apprentice program and started getting cast in supporting roles at regional opera companies. I travelled for work, Cincinnati, Portland, Santa Fe. I built a resume. I got better, more confident, more skilled. I was 28 when I got cast as Musetta in La Boheme at a mid-sized company in Chicago. It was my first principal role, the breakthrough I'd been working toward. The run would be 8 performances over 3 weeks in November. I called my parents to tell them. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother said. "We'll try to come." "Don't bother." "What?" I said, "Don't bother. I'm not asking you to come." "But this is a big deal." "It is, which is why I'm inviting people who actually care about my music." "Helena, I mean it. I'm done pretending it matters to me whether you show up or not. It doesn't. You trained me very well to stop needing you." "That's cruel." "It's honest. You taught me that too." I hung up. My hands shook, but I felt clear-headed, calm. I'd waited 12 years to say that. It felt right to say it now. The Chicago production was magnificent. I sang Musetta's waltz 8 times, and each time I felt the audience fall in love with her. I was good. I knew I was good. The reviews confirmed it. Agents started calling. My parents didn't come. Maya sent flowers. After closing night, I stood in my dressing room looking at the cards and messages from colleagues, friends, teachers who'd made the trip. The room was full of celebration from people who'd chosen to be part of my life. I felt no absence, no gap where my parents should have been. Just fullness, completion. I'd done it. I'd built the career they'd never believed in. I'd become the artist they'd never understood. I'd filled every empty seat they'd left with people who actually wanted to be there. And the best part, I'd done it all without their approval. Their absence had taught me that the only validation that mattered was my own. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Still in costume, still wearing Musetta's bold red dress and elaborate hair. But underneath, I saw myself clearly. Strong, capable, complete. I sang for audiences now. I sang for colleagues who respected my work. I sang for students I coached who looked at me with admiration. I sang for the pure joy of it, the challenge, the artistry. But I never sang for my family. That door had closed years ago, the night I'd stood in a white choir dress and watched 4 empty seats remain empty. They'd missed it. The whole journey. Every step, every milestone, every transformation. And I'd learnt to sing anyway. Learned to sing better, in fact, without the weight of their indifference dragging at my voice. I hummed softly in the empty dressing room, warming down my voice after the performance. The melody was my own, improvised, free, beautiful, because no one was listening except me. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.